Lisa Holm was just 17 years old when she disappeared without a trace after stepping out of the cafe where she worked weekends. What began as a seemingly ordinary evening would quickly unravel into one of the most harrowing and high-profile cases in Sweden's recent history. Clue after disturbing clue began to surface, painting a chilling picture. Soon, the country was gripped by her disappearance, and more than 1,000 volunteers joined the largest search operation Sweden had ever seen. What they ultimately uncovered left the nation stunned. Lisa was born on February 7, 1998, in the small, peaceful town of Hu, Sweden. She lived there with her parents and older sister in a quiet environment. Lisa was known for her kind nature, strong will, and positive spirit. She had already set her sights on the future, planning to study architecture in Australia after finishing school. Her passion for discovery extended beyond academics. She had traveled with her family to various countries and embraced independence from a young age. By the summer of 2015, Lisa had taken a step toward that independence. She secured her first serious job at a café about a 40-minute drive from her home. At first, her parents drove her back and forth, but once she got her scooter license, they gifted her a scooter, since Swedish law required her to wait until 18 for a car license. Lisa welcomed the freedom, though she was still new to driving. To ease the transition, her father followed her to work and back each day for a few weeks. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. She only worked weekends, and her father maintained that routine until June 7th, the first day he let Lisa drive herself without an escort. That afternoon, her parents stopped by the cafe for lunch. It was a busy day, and Lisa was juggling tasks behind the counter. She took a short break to share a snack with them before they returned home. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa texted her father to say she was leaving work, but just 3 minutes later, he received a phone call from her. When he picked up, no one spoke. Instead, he heard muffled voices in the background, perhaps Lisa talking to coworkers, and the sound of a car door slamming shut. Assuming she had pocket-dialed him by accident, he called out her name, got no response, and hung up, expecting she'd be home shortly. But Lisa never came home. An hour had passed, and Lisa still hadn't come home. Her parents began to worry. She should have arrived long ago. It was her first solo ride on the scooter, and her father couldn't shake the thought that something might have gone wrong on the road. He tried calling her several times, but each call went straight to voicemail. Lisa's phone was off. After a few more tense minutes, he couldn't sit still any longer. Grabbing his keys, he jumped into his car and headed out, hoping to meet her on the road. He drove slowly, scanning every stretch for signs of an accident or trouble. But Lisa was nowhere in sight. Eventually, he reached the cafe. There was no sign of his daughter, but her scooter was still parked right in front of the building. Panic started creeping in. He had just driven the entire route, and Lisa was nowhere along the way. Seeing the scooter briefly gave him hope. Maybe she was just finishing up something inside, but that relief vanished quickly. The cafe was empty. Even more troubling, the scooter's keys were still in the ignition, and her helmet was hanging from the handlebar. Something Lisa would never have left behind. She was responsible and cautious. Leaving her scooter like that, unattended, didn't make sense. Her father's worry turned to fear. Something wasn't right. At the same time, Lisa's mother called the cafe owner, hoping she might know where Lisa had gone. But the woman was just as confused. She hadn't seen Lisa. Around 6 p.m., she had checked in with her staff, who said they were closing for the day. Alarmed by the call, the cafe owner got in her car and drove straight to the location. On the way, she phoned 4 friends who lived nearby and asked them to join the search. When she arrived, she and Lisa's father began combing through the cafe and the surrounding area. Desperation was growing. One last possibility remained. Maybe Lisa had decided, for some reason, to take the bus home instead of using her scooter. Her mother and older sister checked the schedule and drove to the bus stop in their town, hoping she would appear. But the bus came and went. Lisa wasn't on it. That hope faded just like the daylight. It was nearly 10 p.m. now, and darkness had settled in. With no other leads, Lisa's family finally called the police. Police wasted no time launching an extensive search. The sight of Lisa's scooter abandoned in the cafe parking lot, keys still in the ignition, raised immediate red flags. It strongly suggested the possibility of an abduction. Such cases were rare in Sweden, especially in a quiet rural province like Lisa's hometown. Given the circumstances, authorities acted swiftly. Search teams with trained dogs were dispatched into the surrounding area, while other officers went door to door speaking with residents near the cafe. Word of Lisa's disappearance quickly spread. Her classmates and friends began sharing posts across social media, hoping to draw attention to her case and reach potential witnesses. As the search stretched through the night, no concrete leads emerged. By Monday morning, police officially announced Lisa's disappearance to the public, urging anyone with information to come forward. That same day, a man working in a barn just across the road from the cafe made a discovery: a single motorcycle glove lying on the floor. He notified the police. Detectives had already searched that barn the night Lisa vanished, but had missed the glove. When they showed it to Lisa's parents, they immediately confirmed it was hers. The glove discovery reinforced the growing belief that Lisa had been abducted. In response, police ramped up their efforts, deploying even more resources. By this point, news of the case had spread nationwide. Volunteers began arriving by the hundreds, eager to help in any way they could. On Tuesday, new and unsettling evidence came to light. Volunteers searching along a dirt road just a few hundred yards from the cafe came across a series of personal items: a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and part of a broken smartphone screen. Investigators quickly confirmed all of it belonged to Lisa. That stretch of road instantly became the new focal point of the search. Soon after, more items were found scattered nearby. Additional fragments of Lisa's phone, her ID, and several more receipts. All of it lay strewn across the same dirt path. At this point, the abduction theory was no longer just a possibility. It became the central focus of the investigation. Police intensified their efforts, bringing in all available units. As the case dominated national headlines, more and more people arrived to assist. What started as a local search ballooned into a massive national effort. Even a local volunteer organization known for locating missing persons joined the cause. In total, more than 1,000 people took part in the operation, making it the largest search effort in Sweden's modern history. As news of Lisa's disappearance continued to spread, police began receiving a steady stream of tips from the public. One in particular stood out. A woman called in to report a strange encounter she had experienced the day before Lisa went missing. She had been out for a jog when a man standing beside his parked car stopped her in the middle of the road. He spoke in English and asked for directions to a city she had never even heard of. Trying to be helpful, she pulled out her phone to show him the route on Google Maps. But the man insisted. He asked her to get into his car and input the destination directly into his GPS. Alarmed by the request, the woman declined and quickly ran off. What stuck with her, though, was the man's face. She told police she believed she had seen him before, working on the barn located just across the road from the café where Lisa had last been seen. Around the same time, Lisa's co-workers also came forward with a troubling memory. On the day she disappeared, one of them had noticed two men standing across the road from the café watching the building. At the time, it hadn't seemed important, but after learning what had happened to Lisa, the witness decided to inform police. The next morning, Wednesday, Lisa's father and several friends returned to the dirt road where her belongings had previously been found. Determined to search every inch, they walked farther along the route. That's when Lisa's father made another disturbing discovery: her driver's license and house keys lying by the roadside. It appeared as though someone had been driving away from the cafe, discarding her personal items along the way. Following these finds, police and volunteers focused all efforts on the area. Despite the renewed push, no further evidence turned up that day. But that evening brought another breakthrough, thanks to a friend of Lisa's father. On his way home from the day's search, he drove past the cafe and noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove had been discovered days earlier. Something told him to take one more look. Grabbing a flashlight from his car, he stepped inside. It was already growing dark, and he slowly made his way through the dim interior. After a few minutes, something shiny on the ground caught his attention. When he got closer, he realized it was a woman's earring, and then spotted a matching one nearby. He immediately contacted the police. Investigators showed the earrings to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that they belonged to their daughter. Following the discovery of Lisa's earrings, police once again sealed off the barn and launched a far more thorough search. The lead detective later explained that during the initial stages of the investigation, the priority had been to locate Lisa herself. As a result, the barn was only briefly inspected, and smaller items, like the earrings, may have been overlooked. This time, they weren't taking any chances. Forensic specialists and search dogs were brought in to comb through every inch of the structure. During the search, investigators came across an unusual piece of evidence behind one of the walls: human feces. At first glance, it didn't seem significant, but the forensic team had a different view. They proposed a theory based on behavioral patterns observed in violent offenders. When individuals commit extremely serious or traumatic crimes, their bodies often experience a surge of adrenaline. This intense stress response can trigger involuntary physical reactions, including the urgent need to relieve themselves. In fact, experts noted it's not uncommon for perpetrators to urinate or defecate before or during a murder. Given the fact that Lisa's glove and earrings had already been found in this barn, detectives began to suspect that the perpetrator might have brought her there during the abduction. If so, the feces might have been left behind by the suspect during the height of the crime. Investigators collected the sample and sent it for DNA testing. By Friday, the search effort expanded to cover a broader area. Volunteers made their way to a farm complex located about 2 miles from the cafe. The site consisted of several large buildings where many people worked, and the search team intended to check each one. Shortly after the team arrived, 2 men appeared at the farm. They didn't speak Swedish and communicated only in English. One of them told the group that the police had already searched the area, but the team leader wasn't convinced. If a search had taken place, he believed he would have been informed. He chose to continue. The 2 men lingered around the property for a while, quietly observing the volunteers as they moved through the grounds. Eventually, without further interaction, they got back in their vehicle and left. About an hour later, members of the search team made another discovery, this time behind the cowshed on the farm. Hidden beneath a pile of branches, they found a motorcycle helmet, a jacket, and a pair of headphones. Police were immediately called to the scene. Upon arrival, investigators confirmed the items all belonged to Lisa. Forensic experts were dispatched to the farm without delay, and the site was designated for a full-scale search. In the meantime, detectives were briefed on the two strange men who had earlier tried to discourage volunteers from inspecting the area. The story raised immediate red flags. Investigators recalled a similar report, one involving a woman who had been approached by a suspicious English-speaking man during a jog. They began connecting the dots and realized they might already have a lead. Early in the investigation, police had conducted house-to-house checks in the area around the café. Just a few miles away, they came across a home occupied by two brothers from Lithuania and the wife of one of them. None of the three spoke Swedish. They communicated exclusively in English. In fact, they were the only non-Swedish speakers living in the area. There were also other details that made them persons of interest. The two men worked in both the barn across from the café, where Lisa's glove and earrings had been found, and at the same farm where her helmet had now turned up. They knew the layout of both locations, and notably, the dirt road where Lisa's scattered belongings had been discovered led directly toward their home. With no other viable suspects, police made the decision to bring all three in for questioning. Meanwhile, forensic teams continued their search of the farm, joined by volunteers. While canvassing the grounds, their attention shifted to an old trailer tucked away in the tall grass. It looked weathered, unused, forgotten. But something about it stood out. Near the trailer's door, the grass was visibly flattened, as though something, or someone, had been lying there recently. Even more telling, blades of grass were caught under the doorframe, suggesting it had been opened not long ago. When investigators pulled the door open, they were immediately hit by a strong and unmistakable odor, the smell of decay. Inside the trailer, investigators found a row of metal lockers, likely remnants from when the structure had been used as a changing room for workers. Nearly all of the lockers were locked shut, except for one. That detail immediately caught the attention of the forensic team. They feared the worst. As they began opening each locker, methodically working their way down the line, their fears were confirmed. Inside the one unlocked locker, partially hidden beneath a pile of old clothes and dirty rags, they discovered Lisa's body. Though the space was small, the perpetrator had managed to force her inside. A rope was tied tightly around her neck, and her head was wrapped in layers of tape. Her pants had been pulled down, her shirt pulled up. Despite the position of her clothing, medical examiners later determined there were no signs of sexual assault. The cause of death was strangulation. All of Lisa's clothing was collected and sent to the lab for further analysis. As word of the discovery spread, it sent shockwaves across Sweden. Lisa's disappearance had already been dominating national headlines for days. But now, with confirmation of her brutal murder, the public reaction turned to grief and disbelief. Violent crimes of this nature were extremely rare in Sweden, especially in small rural towns. The senselessness and cruelty of the act stunned the nation. Later that same day, something strange and unsettling surfaced online. A few YouTube users stumbled across a video titled 13, which had been uploaded exactly 13 days before Lisa's body was found. The video itself was little more than a countdown timer, but what disturbed people most was the name of the channel that posted it: Lisa Holm. The bizarre coincidence quickly caught the media's attention. Speculation ran wild. Was this a sinister prediction? A taunt? But as investigators looked into it, the explanation turned out to be far less mysterious. Someone had changed the name of the YouTube channel and the video title after Lisa's murder had become public. Whether it was an attempt to fuel conspiracy theories or just a cruel prank, it left many feeling deeply unsettled. While the discovery of Lisa's body stunned the nation, police were moving quickly behind the scenes to find her killer. By the time her remains were found, investigators had already brought in 3 individuals for questioning: 2 brothers from Lithuania and the wife of one of them. All 3 denied any involvement. They claimed that during the time of Lisa's abduction, they were at home, each providing an alibi for the other. According to their statements, the older brother, 35-year-old Norris, was asleep in his room. His wife was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and the younger brother was using the computer. Norris also added that around 8 p.m., he woke up and drove to a nearby gas station where he bought pizza and cigarettes. Investigators were skeptical. The alibis came solely from within the household, and it was entirely possible the trio had agreed to cover for one another. Police collected DNA samples from all 3, but at that point, they had no physical evidence directly linking any of them to the crime. That would soon change. Forensic teams were still combing the barn and the surrounding farm with every resource at their disposal. Their persistence finally paid off. Inside the barn, tucked away in a small room that resembled an office, investigators found something deeply disturbing. The room featured a large window overlooking the café, clearly offering a full view of the employees working inside, including Lisa. On the floor and walls near the window, forensic specialists discovered 15 separate traces of male semen. The pattern suggested someone had spent time standing there, watching the cafe and masturbating. The samples were rushed to the lab. DNA testing confirmed all 15 samples belonged to Norris, the older brother. The feces previously found in the barn, also his. In a separate room once used for storing cow's milk, investigators noticed something odd. A pipe mounted about 2 feet above the ground was coated in a thick layer of dust, except for one narrow strip that had been recently disturbed. Its shape matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Blood was also found on the pipe. DNA testing confirmed what investigators had feared. The blood belonged to Lisa, and the connection to Norris was no longer circumstantial. Beneath the pipe where Lisa's blood had been discovered, investigators found yet another critical piece of evidence: a section of rope identical to the one used to strangle her. Forensic analysis revealed 2 DNA profiles on the rope, Lisa's and Norris's. It was a pivotal breakthrough. At last, police had physical evidence linking Norris directly to the murder weapon. The evidence didn't stop there. A strand of Lisa's hair was also recovered from the floor of the same room, further supporting the theory that she had died in that very spot. Meanwhile, her jacket, recovered earlier near the cowshed, contained traces of Norris's DNA as well. With the mounting forensic evidence, investigators were able to piece together an approximate sequence of events. They believed Norris had been watching the cafe from the small office inside the barn for some time, likely observing Lisa during her shifts. When she left work that evening and stood alone in the parking lot, he made his move. Based on the jogger's earlier report, it's likely he approached Lisa and asked for directions, perhaps to a city she didn't recognize, and then requested her help entering the location into his GPS. Given Lisa's kind and helpful nature, it's possible she agreed to assist him. Once she was inside his vehicle, investigators believe Norris subdued her, likely taping her mouth to silence her, and then drove her to the barn. There, he used the rope to hang her from the pipe, ultimately killing her by strangulation. According to forensic experts, the intense rush of adrenaline during the act may have caused him to lose control of his bodily functions, which could explain the human feces found nearby. After Lisa died, Norris is believed to have placed her body in his vehicle and driven to the nearby farm. Along the way, he discarded her belongings, phone, ID, receipts, out the window. At the farm, he concealed her body inside the old trailer locker, covering it with discarded clothing. From the moment of her abduction to the concealment of her body, police estimate the entire crime took less than an hour. Despite the overwhelming forensic evidence, Norris continued to deny any involvement. With no evidence implicating the other two, his wife and younger brother were released. Almost immediately after their release, the pair left Sweden and returned to Lithuania. As the trial approached, the stakes were high and preparations intense. Norris maintained his innocence, claiming that his DNA was only present in the barn because he had worked there for an extended period. He also pointed to the alibi provided by his wife and younger brother, both of whom insisted he had been home during the time of the abduction. However, investigators remained skeptical, viewing those accounts as potentially coordinated and unreliable. Initially, those explanations might have held some weight in court. But there was one detail that couldn't be explained away so easily: the presence of Norris's DNA on Lisa's clothing. This, investigators argued, could only have come from direct contact with her on the day of the murder. Adding to the case against him, police identified a witness who reported seeing Norris's vehicle near the café shortly before and after Lisa disappeared. According to the witness, the car had been seen multiple times driving along the road connecting the café and the nearby farm, precisely when Norris was supposedly asleep at home, according to his alibi. In the months that followed the discovery of Lisa's body, forensic experts continued examining every piece of evidence using the most advanced technology available. Eventually, they made a devastating find. Norris's DNA was present on nearly all of Lisa's clothing, including inside her underwear. The case continued to grip the country. With national attention still focused on the investigation, detectives pushed even harder to find any additional evidence that could bolster the prosecution. They traveled to Lithuania to re-interview Norris's wife and younger brother. Once again, his wife stuck to her story. She claimed that Norris had not left the house at any point between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. But when it came time to speak with the younger brother, the investigation took a turn. Detectives laid out all the forensic evidence, step by step. What had been found, how it connected to Norris, and what Lisa had endured. Faced with the overwhelming proof, the younger brother broke. He chose to talk. And with that, the truth began to emerge. The younger brother's confession brought crucial clarity to the timeline. He told investigators that Norris had not been home during the evening of Lisa's disappearance. In fact, he only returned around 7:30 p.m., covered in dirt. As soon as he walked through the door, Norris went straight to the washing machine and threw in all his clothes. Shortly after, when police began going door to door questioning residents, Norris leaned in and quietly told his brother, "Tell them I was home at that time." Later, Norris claimed he had panicked. He said he feared being blamed for a crime he hadn't committed, because he was an immigrant and had no alibi. His younger brother admitted he initially believed that explanation, but once he learned the full extent of the evidence, he realized the truth. A month after Lisa's murder, her funeral was held. The church could only hold 130 people, but that didn't stop the crowd. Mourners came from all over, far exceeding the venue's capacity. Organizers set up benches and large video screens outside, allowing everyone a chance to say goodbye. 4 months after her death, the trial began. The case once again gripped the nation. With so much public attention, everyone involved, from investigators to prosecutors to the defense, faced immense pressure. There was no room for error. Norris's attorney argued that his client's DNA might have ended up on Lisa's clothing simply because he had worked in the barn. But the prosecution quickly dismantled that claim. The presence of his DNA inside Lisa's underwear, they argued, could only be explained by direct and intimate contact. Work-related transfer didn't apply here. When pressed, the defense had no alternative explanation. No other solid evidence or testimony was offered to support Norris's innocence. At one point during the trial, Norris's defense attempted a last-ditch strategy, shifting the blame onto his younger brother. The theory suggested that the brother had somehow collected multiple samples of Norris's DNA, then planted them both on Lisa's body and throughout the crime scene. But the court wasn't convinced. The defense failed to explain how such a complex manipulation could be carried out without detection, and the claim quickly lost credibility. The trial lasted a month. In the end, the evidence left little room for doubt. Norris was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Given that this was Sweden, his punishment came with a caveat. His facility bore more resemblance to a modest 3-star hotel than a typical high-security prison. His lawyer filed an appeal, but it was promptly denied. Then, in early 2017, Norris made a surprising request. He asked to be deported and transferred to a prison in his native Lithuania. The reasons behind the move weren't clear. Lithuanian prisons were known to be far less comfortable than their Swedish counterparts. Still, the court granted the transfer, perhaps in part because housing an inmate in Sweden cost taxpayers hundreds of dollars per day. Later that year, his real motive came to light. Once in Lithuania, Norris appealed to a local court. To the shock of many, his sentence was reduced from life imprisonment to 15 years. But the victory was short-lived. Just weeks later, the decision was overturned, and his life sentence was reinstated, this time with no chance of returning to Sweden and its relatively lenient conditions. 5 years passed. Then, in August 2022, Norris faced the harsh reality of his new environment. During an inmate transfer within the prison, he was attacked by another prisoner with a homemade shank. The injuries were severe. Norris died en route to the hospital. As for Norris's wife, questions about her role in the case still linger. While investigators have found virtually no evidence pointing to her direct involvement in Lisa's abduction or murder, her DNA was absent from all of Lisa's belongings and clothing. They haven't entirely ruled her out. What remains a possibility is that she knew what her husband had done and helped him avoid justice by providing a false alibi. Suspicion also surrounds Norris's younger brother. Several café employees reported seeing 2 men standing near the barn and watching them in the hours before Lisa vanished. If one of those men was Norris, it's likely the second was his brother. Yet despite this sighting, the younger brother's DNA was never found, neither in the barn nor on Lisa's clothing, making his direct involvement in the crime unlikely. It's possible that both brothers had been observing the young staff at the cafe, maybe even engaging in inappropriate conversation or behavior. But when it came to action, it appears that only Norris crossed the line, acting alone in carrying out the horrific crime that shocked an entire nation.